Leadership really, it's an individual, a person, or something which galvanizes people or organizations or governments towards a purpose or a main cause of delivering on something else. So that, to me, that's what it means to be a leader. First, you have to have something which is required to be delivered, or you have to have a vision of where you want things to get to. And you need people, you need whatever resources behind you to put them together and deliver on that common purpose for that vision in whatever way it is, from a political perspective, from a business perspective, or from, just general populace. I would say being an African child, having grown in the villages and having grown during the time, the 1980s time, the country in a way was sort of divided. I remember, for instance, as a young child, they will always call us to certain meetings and discuss about, free Nelson Mandela, free, all those other things. It then, as a young child, you start to asking, but who are these people? Nelson Mandela's, and so we didn't have, pictures, or we didn't have much. But we had names of people whom apparently these were our leaders at the time. And from there on, you start having that conscious awareness that, there are people out there trying to achieve some sort of a purpose. And that purpose, at the time, I think was political freedom for the masses. And, these are our leaders. And you start saying, well, why can't I be them? Why can't I do what they do? Why can't I achieve what they've achieved and be in that sort of mold as well? And consciously, as you grow through, as I said, from a village point of view, consciously you start then, finding out, who are our closest leaders. We have the chief. What's the chief doing to enhance my position, in terms of as a person staying in that village. You then look at your uncles, you then look at your fathers and the rest. So I think in a way I will say I was one of those children born at a time when this thing of leadership was up there. I will tell myself maybe as I've always been reluctant person in terms of coming forward from a number of perspectives. But, I grew up in a village, stayed most part of my life in the village. Then I moved over to a boarding school. From a boarding school, that's when I interacted mainly with people from various other institutions, villages, townships, and a whole lot of places. From there on, I think, I remember from a business perspective, the first time, our business economics class teacher, came in and said, look, we're going to open a tuck shop, but, in terms of this tuck shop, I want all the students to contribute money and give to someone else. But that person has to be the one who, get the highest mark in business economics. And fortunately, it was me, and I think I got about 97% somewhere there. In business economics, the student contributed 50 Rand. I went in and I bought some groceries, I bought a number of things and started running and managing the tuck shop in that school. And from there on, things just moved on, and there was a competition, accounting competition, which I think there was a KPMG partner, Mr. Andre Vogelin. I think he's now retired. He came in, he put us together and said, look, They in this competition, they will require you to study JSE and do this and pick up shares. And the winner, is going to be, afterwards, I'm going to employ that person as a article clerk. And then I was leading the team. I think it was the four of us. I was leading the team, in terms of that. I think this was on my matric days. I think we were the first black school in Limpopo, to get up to the quarterfinals. And that was a big achievement. I think I participated in debates, United Nations, where our school as well was one of the first sort of, Bantu education school, to achieve those results. Then after my matric, the partner came in, I had the distinction on accounting as well and this and that. He came in and said, well, I think you must come and work for me. And I will say the rest is history. I walked in the office, I found I think there were two black guys with degrees from various institutions. And there was a lot of other people, I guess, also with degrees and practical experience in the article clerk space. Now, I walked in there, they put me at the back because I'm just fresh from matric, and my color at the time, it was still trying to integrate our society and this and that. So put me at the back, but I think that gave me a lot of time to reflect and say, well, if I'm here at the back spending my time on filing, maybe it's time I start learning as to what's going on. And I think I will say from that time, about 1997 and until around 2004, 2005, I spent that time learning quite a lot of things, learning about how people are doing in the business sector, learning how organizations are being run, and I was even subscribing to, I think, Harvard business magazines and learning all those kind of things. So that to me, it's what really put me where I am into Africa Oil. So when I came to Africa Oil, my lesson learned, my sort of theoretical aspect were quite molded, and I just had to apply it from a practical point of view. When I joined Pembani, it was around about 2002, in the beginning of 2002. I had finished my articles. I was working at Dinel, the state-owned, arms company. And, I applied like everyone else. And when I applied, I was going to be interviewed. As part of just the research, I started going through understanding who Pembani is at the time worldwide. And then, I came through, obviously, the figures like Phuthuma and Tseke. I think at that time, there was a fight between, I think Phuthuma and Tseke was supposed to acquire some of the nail assets, because the nail, Dr. Tato Mutlana was going through. And there was a discussion as to which one of the black person is going to take over those assets. And then I followed the press clippings, and I got fascinated that, indeed, I thought, obviously there's just only this big white-owned companies and doing this. And then I realized that there are some successful black-owned managed companies out there, and I got inspired and said, if I get a position in this company, I have to make it work. And I have to look forward to being something in the future. And I looked for Pembani as my home going forward. I joined them, I think, as a financial manager, worked through Pembani up until, I think, 2007. Then I decided to take a break and do sort of community work and other things. And I spend most of my time, helping communities in Limpopo around the land claims. For me, land was one issue which I felt that it needed to be dealt properly, and we have to do the right thing because this is our land. With land, you have a sense of purpose and a sense of living in this country. So I went and worked with the chief, put in structures, from a business point of view. I said, let me go and apply this. From there, the process went well, and I was there. But I got a phone call from one of Putuma's, I think, partners and friends, Joe Makove, and said, look, Africa Oil doesn't have a CEO at this point in time. And, do you have time? Can you go and see what's happening? And, I said, okay, I do have time. I can do it. And I went to, he said, no, you must go and see Putuma and have a discussion. I went to see him and he said, well, I don't know what's happening at Africa Oil, but I'm worried. Call Paul Jenkins. I think Paul Jenkins at the time was running Pembani. I went and met him, and the following day said, "Oh, I'm here to work." He introduced me to the staff and said, "This is your CEO." Now, we hadn't even discussed my pay, and I remember Putuma asked me, "So how are we going to get paid?" I said, "Well, whatever was paid the previous CEO, I'll take it." And I just went in. When I came into Africa, I didn't know what was going on. I met some of the key staff. They showed me figures and said, "Look, we've got debtors book. We have to pay this company engine. We have to do this and that, and we've got salaries and this and to pay, and we're looking quite good." And a week later, I went to Putuma and said, "No, I think this company is looking good, and I'm quite interested, and I will stay and make it work." This was around about September. October, we're supposed to pay engine. I went to finance and said, "Well, what's happening? Are we paying our creditors?" And said, "No, we don't have the money." And I asked, "But why? Last month you said there's money, today there's no money." Said, "No, the people are not paying, our customers are not agreeing to some terms which you are proposing." And I think it sort of shocked me, and I thought, geez, what's happening here? In a few days' time, we have to pay about 40 million rand as part of the installments of 250 million. And you're saying to me, we don't have anything in the bank. And in a way, one felt embarrassed, that I just came from Putuma and told him, things are looking good and I'm looking forward. And here I am, and there's nothing. Decided to go back to him and said, "Look, unfortunately, we've got a bigger problem, and I don't know what's the solution, but I'll try and get back to you and sort it out." He was angry and he wanted us to find out what's going on, and that's when he brought in, I think, Kaya Ngula to be the chairman and start putting in, I think, systems, processes in the company. And I think from there onwards, one started digging through what's inside Africa Oil, what are the issues, and we had a situation, I think with engine where they were calling and say what's happening, and I went to Cape Town and met them and asked for some time, and fortunately again they agreed, and I realized that the problem was actually with the customers, and again, the problem was also with Africa Oil management at the time, that there were certain things which Engine proposed that those things needs to be done, and those things were done and were left to the right at the end. At the time, we said, look, let's just gracefully close Africa Oil because the writing was on the wall. We owe people too much money. We don't have the sales because customers are saying we can't pay you, we can't trust you, we can't buy from you. And the best way forward is just to pay off everyone else whatever cent is due. And it was a nice episode of BEE, and we'll start something new. So that was the thinking at the time, and that's I felt it was an appropriate thing at that particular point in time. I went home and started going through some of the material of Africa Oil and understanding, the nature of Africa Oil, where it comes from and what it means in the broader society and what it means to the employees and everyone else associated with the company. And, I was quite surprised to see that, I think if we had closed Africa Oil, we would have closed, the chapter called BE in a way. And I don't profess that Africa Oil really represent the broad BE in South Africa. But from an oil and gas perspective, it felt that if Africa Oil, I think you'll remember TEPCO, Excel, all those things had morphed into a different from what they started. And for me, it felt that, maybe, from the beginning, this thing called BE was just, a failed sort of project. And I felt that if we close, then we're saying, well, I think we're putting in a stamp of approval to that project and say BE has failed. So one felt that one needed to do something else. We need to look at this company and we need to come up with something and a model and say, well, this thing is a successful thing and it can work. And that's when I put in, I'll say I put in on my boots and said, let me give my life and everything else to this project and see where it can take one to. And hopefully if it works, because we're at the bottom of bottoms, if it works, then the rewards for everyone are going to be quite significant. And I think, personally for me, that's when I started going to a number of people and say, well, instead of looking at closing, what can we do really to save this company? What do we have in the company, which we can then say this is the best of Africa Oil, and we can take forward and work on that. One of the key things I think was the name Africa Oil. Then people trusted Africa Oil. People had worked with Africa Oil, and they knew Africa Oil can deliver. It was just a situation where it was in the wrong management space. But Africa Oil, and there were people at Africa Oil, the employees specific, can deliver and are trustworthy, and you can work with. And those are some of obviously our core values. Africa Oil has always been willing to do to go an extra mile for its customers, for all the people it's working with to deliver on a particular product which the customers required. And one then took those and say, well, I think if we take the fact that we consistent in terms of what we do, when we have the opportunities and the resources to do that, we trustworthy, we can deliver on that. And the people are willing to go extra mile. The people are accessible. The people can try and move mountains in a short period of time. And let's use that and build an institution which the broader BE populace can be proud of. And for me, that's when we sort of develop those brand values and say from now on we're going to implement them, we're going to live them, and we're going to make them who Africa Oil is. And I think one of the other key things which I realized was that, as a business and again as a leader, the important thing is obviously finance. You need to look after your money, you need to look after the finances, and you need to show people, you need to be open. You need to show people your books, everything else about you and where the challenges are. And I think I remember talking to Kaya, who was the chairman, and say, let's put together a proper board. Fine, we're not going to pay, significantly high fees, as a company, but we need to have a proper board which is going to oversee everything else, and I will be reporting to that board and look at, the progress which we're taking. We were fortunate that Putuma had a relationship with, I think, our chairman, still now, Mr. Paul Hanneman, who's legendary from an insurance perspective at Alexander Forbes. We brought in, I think, Keith Ashen from Engen. He had a lot of experience working at Engen. I think one of the last projects at Engen was looking at a debtors book and restructuring Engen. And we had Kaya, we had Joe, and the guys from Pembane. Joe Makobe has been there from Africa Oil, I think since 96, 95 days. So, we put together those senior people who, to me at the time, and they were holding me accountable to make sure that we deliver. And, in a way, surrounded by those people, and, with Putuma himself, always supportive, surrounded by those people, one was under, significant pressure to be able to deliver and make sure that, these people have done well in their industries and in their lives before they came and be board members. And you don't want to, destroy their reputation by doing silly things, for a quick buck or something. And we needed to implement a mechanism to make sure that, our reputation as Africa Oil from customers, from the people whom we work with is quite impeccable, and we can deliver on what we do. I think the key success of that was when PIC came in and invested. I think in a way, other than looking at the technical things, the numbers, it was one of the easier due diligence because we had those structures in place. They were not coming in to help us create structures. We had board committees, we had a number of, we're running a proper business, albeit it's a BE, entrepreneurial, small business, but it was a proper business which at any time can be a candidate for JSE, listing company. We are a BE company because of, the nature of South Africa and where it comes from. But at the end of the day, we are a business competing in a global environment. And I think, for most of the BE companies, if every other company, small, big startup, and this can then, wherever it starts and wherever it looks at and say, look, as a company, I'm part of this global village of companies. And the global village has got certain standards, certain requirements, for it to succeed. I think, it's common cause that most of the companies, especially from the West, the US and this, have succeeded because of a specific purpose and or a specific thing which they implemented in their company. And that specific obviously has been, the transparency. I think it's quite key that, the executives, the staff, the company itself, and everyone else, the books, everything is transparent in the company. Every person walks into the company, says, I want to understand what you do. I want to know how you do it, where you make your money, where you make your losses. you can be able to articulate and explain that and show it in evidence, in books, in financial statements, and those reports and all those things. So for me, that was key. That we have to be transparent. We have to be make sure that our reporting it's quite okay, and we have to have people in the leadership and in the board and the committees have to have a purpose as well, have to have credible people who have done something, and they can hold anyone within the institution accountable. Effectively, as a CEO, there's always a temptation to have the people who likes you, the people who worship you around the board. But that was not how I wanted things to be done. I wanted these people to sit there and hold me accountable. And if I'm not doing things, they come to me and say, well, you're not doing this and this and this correct, and our view is that you need to change. And I also have my own views, and we eventually come to a common cause and say, this is how it should be done. So that was key. And we also have to be customer centric. I think one of the things in our companies that we always say to ourselves that we are always as good as the last delivery. At the end of the day, our role is to deliver fuel, energy to customers out there. From whichever angle you can look at it, there is someone else who says, look, I'm looking for this product, I'm looking for this diesel, I'm looking for this petrol delivered for me because I need to do certain things. I need to light my house, I need to cook a meal, I need to carry on with my life. And here is Africa Oil, I trust them to do that thing for me. And you have to make sure that you can move mountains for that customer, big or small. And that's where, as Africa Oil and from a leadership, we said this is going to be critical for us. We're going to make sure that our customers, when they've got that load, they can trust us with the next load and the next load and the next load. And we started building into that and said, I remember I said to the salespeople that I don't want you guys to be just salespeople selling. I want you guys to be customer relationship people. You need to have a relationship with customers, and I need to go and see those customers wherever they are, even if I don't understand much about them. But each and every customer, if possible, I want him to look at me in the face and says, I can trust this person, I can trust this man with all my money. And this is what I always say to my my team in the office, that you need to be out there. I don't want customers calling us and say there's a problem. I want us going to them and say, look, we've encountered this problem and this is what we're doing to help you. And if we can't help you, there is someone else there who can help you. Albeit it's a competitor. We're not going to build complicated models where things are done by computer. Computers help us to calculation complex things which we human beings can't do. But we have to be able to know and understand everything. We have to be quite simple in our structure. We have to be able to understand from the guys on operations. What are they doing that is not helping my customers? The guys at finance, those are, I wanted my team to be, mingling among themselves and everyone else understanding that if we don't have money to pay for a product, that means customer X and Y is going to be impacted. And this is where the problem is, and this is what we're doing to solve it, and sort of build a teamwork from all angles and remove the silos. You don't have these departments, sitting on the corner doing this and the other departments not knowing. Of course, that was one of the challenging things, because that means people have got all the information of the organization, and sometimes people use that information, they misunderstand what you're trying to say, what you're trying to achieve, and it gets out and misinterpreted, and that was one of the challenges. But I think our values really speaks to being customer-centric organization, that we have to service the customer, we have to deliver to the customer, but we also, as an organization, we rely on a whole lot of people, financiers. They give us money and they want returns. We have to be transparent, we have to be accessible, we have to be agile, and those values. For an Africoil, I will say, the values were forced on us by the circumstances, and we also developed out of that, because the South African oil and gas structure is quite complex, and the only way to survive is if you are a big multinational organization out there, doing I think if you look at the market share of the big companies, you will realize that as a small company, it's quite difficult to survive and grow and prosper. I wish our organization was one of the new, I always give an example like Uber, where it came in, it dislodged how the whole commuter taxi industry process was working, and I think it's still going to do a lot of things going forward. But we are also sort of an old age industry competing, in the bigger sphere of things, and we had to then develop models which differentiate us from what it's been done and what has been done throughout the ages. And I think one of the things we decided was agility. It's quite key. If a customer says, and customers also, they make mistakes, says, I need a load delivered for me in Witbank at 10 o'clock. He orders that load today. 10 o'clock, in the evening before the following day, the customer panics and says, no, I actually want a load from somewhere else. And then you still processes, you still delivering. You get there, the customer says, no, I'm sorry, I've ordered somewhere because I wasn't sure that you will deliver. You have to be able to move with the necessary speed and say, well, I can then do something with this load without losing money. And that's how we made sure that we develop those values, that we can be able to move at any point everywhere else, still within this limitation, to make sure that we deliver to our customers. That's one. And I think we also we handle a lot of cash as an organization, and people pay us money before before we can deliver to them, and this. And we said, look, people don't necessarily just give the money to a machine and say, this is Africoil, I've deposited 1 million rand, and please, deliver when you deliver. People want to understand who is this Africoil and who's the person behind this Africoil. And we decided the CEO, the CFO, and all the executive have to be accessible, have to be accountable to all our customers, to all the people whom we work with. And we have to build in ourselves that if a customer calls me on my cell phone, I can pick it up. If I don't know what's happening, I can then indicate, I'll revert back to you, and for sure, I have to investigate and revert back. Even if I say to the customer, look, I don't know what happened and I can't really help you, but it's important that we go back to deliver on what we promised. Again, we realized that we have to be quite consistent. Through that consistency and achieving that consistency, people are going to trust us. And that's where we said, we have to make sure that when we promise something, we're going to deliver on that. And we build in those values for us. I always say that as an entrepreneur, of course, the rewards and everything else are there, and you have to, have a purpose in terms of getting something in the company which you're trying to lead, you're trying to develop. But I think to really succeed and build that resilience in yourself, as an entrepreneur, when you start, you have to say to yourself, look, I'm prepared to lose everything. And when I'm saying I'm prepared to lose everything, I mean you have to be prepared to lose your reputation. You have to be prepared to lose your resource, your money, and say, and hence that's, when I think people come to you and says, put your house down as security, just to show that you also prepared to lose that house which you are living in. And I think for me, that's quite key in terms of as an entrepreneur coming in and saying, this is what I want to build, because people are just not going to, listen to you and say, well, he's wearing nice suits and this, and we can buy into his idea. They're going to criticize it, question it, and throw it out and accept it, and it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of of your energy to try and convince people that indeed what I'm trying to do is worth you believing in. And if you saying to yourself, look, I'm trying to build something which I'm believing in, but I like my cottage in Sandton, city and this and that, then there's a clash of values, there's a clash of ideas, because you have to choose. And for me, I'm saying, when we started and when we looked at this thing, the Africa Oil was what we said we were married to. And we're not going to throw out everything else we have, but we're going to start this process knowing that we can lose everything. Your family will be affected by all these things. Your friends, will be affected by, your inaccessibility, your changes, and a whole lot of other things. And, potentially this can be, one big disaster. You never know. You're out there and you're selling your idea. But if you have that thing in yourself that, this is my idea, this is what I believe can happen, and this is what I'm going to do until, I won't rest until I've delivered on that particular idea, then, you will find that the path is actually easier, because you've got a single mind focus to delivering on what you have to deliver. Even if you have to live in a shack somewhere, for you have to deliver on that. And I think, that's what Africa Oil, in a way, was built on those core values, where people come into Africa Oil and give themselves in and throw in everything else which they have to make sure that, Africa Oil can be a prosperous company. I think even the founders, when they started, they went to borrow about 2 million rand and put in their houses, put in everything else. It went bad. They still went back and say, well, I think Africa Oil is still there. And from Caltex to Xenex, and then Engine came in, and the Engine exited. I came in and built up this organization. So it was inculcated into the founders' ideas and values, the concept of resilience, the concept of making sure that Africa Oil going forward can be that company which leads the BEE oil and gas and leads the South African transformation agenda in the BEE sector.